Welcome to the House of Truth. Today we're continuing our series on Joshua. And we're talking about conquering the promised land. Last time last time we talked about saving Gibeon and how Gibeon was saved twice. Once from destruction from the judgment of God, because they came to him in total surrender, saying, "We will be your servants." Yes, even though they tricked Joshua, they still came, and we show that God is looking for people like that, and will make a space for them. And so I'm with Gibeon, and they were saved us. But when they were saved, the nations around them started attacking them, planned to get rid of them for making peace with the God of Israel. And the world will do the same thing with us. Now, the day what we're the day the today we're gonna look at we're gonna look at the reaction, because if you remember at the beginning of the last lesson, a lot of other nations were planning to all unite together to wipe out Israel, and we're gonna start with the reaction to the victory over those tribes who came over those cities, I should say, who came against Gibeon, and their total defeat by Joshua and the people of Israel. So we begin here. We begin here with this reaction in Joshua 11, verse 1 through 5. And they came to pass when Jabin, king of Hazor, heard of these things, he sent to Yobed, king of Madon, and to the king of Shimron, and the king of Achshaph, and to the kings of the north of the mountains, and of the plains south of Kinnereth, and in the valley, and in the borders of Dor on the west, and to the Canaanite on the east and to the west, and on to the west, and to the Amorite, and to the Hittite, to the Perizzite, to the Jebusite in the mountains, to the Hivite under Hermon in the land of Mizpah. And they went out, they and all their hosts with them, much people, even as the sand of the sea that is upon the seashore in multitude. With chariots, with horse and chariots, very many. And when all these kings were met together, they came and pitched together in the waters of Merom to fight against Israel. So, so what we have here is this. I know it says, you may read it as Hazor, but there's it's a zadi there in Greek. I'm sorry, in Hebrew. Makes it sound which exists in Greek but doesn't exist in English, so it's translated in Z often. But it's really Hatzor. And in English, there's a little play on words you'll see later with that. But what do we see here? This is a pretty large area. This is much bigger than Israel has fought before that. Has fought up to this point. They're proceeding ahead with that plan to unite together, the tribe to wipe Israel. Think if they work all together, they can wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Remember, Israel, so a little time's passed, but not much. And remember, all during the harvest season, it's overflowed. Okay, the river, so they can't. There's no retreat for Israel. So their plan here is to wipe them off the face of the earth, or at least scatter them. And and notice this, as the sand of the shore upon the seashore and multitude. We saw before that expression was used of Israel's army when it had 601,330. It's figurative, meaning it's too much for one person to count. Okay, and we have one, two, three, four, five, six of the seven nations that are out there are in this alliance. And Kinnereth is the name of the Sea of Galilee, as most will say in English. In Hebrew, it means harp. So, and chariots, the Hebrew word today for a tank is Merkava. And Merkava is the same word here as it's Makarvim, chariots, plural in Hebrew. So these are kind of the tanks of that day. Is why they named them that. Why they named their tank a Merkava. So they are gathered to fight Israel. Now we're looking at Israel's reaction and what they do about it. As we continue in Joshua 11:6 through 9. And the Lord said unto Joshua, be not afraid of them, for tomorrow about this time I will deliver them up all slain before Israel. You shall hold their horses, and burn their chariots with fire. So Joshua came, and all the people war with him against him in the waters of Merom suddenly, and they fell upon them. And the Lord delivered them to the hand of Israel, who smote them and chased them unto great Zidon, and unto Misroph, Misro, wait, Misra, Misroth Maim, Misroth Maim, and to the valley of Mizpah eastward, and they smote them till there were none of them left remaining. And Joshua did to them as the Lord bade him. He hewed their horses and burnt their chariots with fire. Okay, so he has a rather sudden, quick victory. And remember, the Melech Adonai is going before them and destroying what they can't. But nonetheless, notice the first thing the Lord says, the refrain of the book of Joshua: do not be afraid. The Lord's going to deliver them. Notice his instructions: hew their horses, hold their horses, and burn their chariots with fire. Now, we don't use that word. We don't use that word like this in English anymore. And even and it's a practice kind of fell out. A practice that's no longer really common in the world, but used to be. If someone wanted to plow with a horse, it was apt to running away. They would cut the tendons on its back legs so it could walk and pull a plow, but they could not run. It would be so there's making these horses of no value of no military value by doing this. In these chariots, they could be using those. They don't have any chariots, and so the gods some effectively take their military hardware and just destroy it, because he doesn't. Most people have thought, well, we can just use that ourselves, except. But the Lord is their defense, and he doesn't want them dependent upon this technology, as it were. These superior weapons, because he is superior to any weapon man can make. So the whole group done away with really pretty quickly. Another quick victory over a large area. I mean, it's one day for tomorrow about this time. And and this chase went on perhaps for a few days. Great Zidon was a ways away, several days. And Misrophomaim wasn't close, and the Valley of Mizpah wasn't either. But they gave chase nonetheless and pursued them, destroying them all. Now he's done with he's done with their army, but now he's not done with them. And here's what we read in Joshua 11 verses 10 through 14. And Joshua turned at that time and took back Hazor and smote the king thereof with the sword. For Hazor was before the head of all those kingdoms. And they smote all the souls that were there with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying them. There was not left any to breathe, and he burned Hazor with fire. And all the cities of those kings, and all the kings of them, that Joshua taking smote them with the edge of the sword. He utterly destroyed them as the servant of the Lord commanded. But for the cities that stood in their strength, Israel burned none of them, save Hazor only. That did Joshua burn. In all the spoil of these cities and the cattle, the children of Israel took for a prey to themselves, but every man they smote with the edge of the sword until they destroyed them. Nearly they left they any to breathe. Okay, so remember when you see the word cattle in King James, it's livestock today. Is a common problem people make with King James. Often people think there's a problem with the King James. The King James is not perfect, just like any other trans. But a lot of times the problem's not the translation itself. It's the fact that the English language has changed. In fact, I would say, in my personal experience, of things I've seen people make complaints about, 85%, it's they don't understand the King James English, and they think and they assign a wrong meaning to it based on modern English. And often they can't they cannot read or they cannot even read even at a very rudimentary level Hebrew or Greek, much less Aramaic. So so they're common. It's like people who can't speak Chinese or Swahili commenting on someone else's job and translating from Chinese to Swahili is what often it's almost that bad. Honestly, they they really just need to learn. Not say anything until they do a little study and actually know what they're talking about. So just repeating what some other person who's probably just as ignorant as them said. But I digress slightly here. The point here is this means livestock. That's why I keep making these little corrections to explain these things. You've got to learn to speak the King James language and use it. And I use this because it's the most indexed translation of all the English translations. The ones you can find, you can cross reference to the most things except. And also, I know where the pitfalls are. So, continuing on here, Hazor got hot. He burned it with fire. And he burned it only that one with fire. Why? That's the king. That's where the king who gathered all the other kings was from. That was his city. So, that city is cursed. It was responsible for bringing all this, this attack on Israel, except. Now the other cities, God said that they would live in cities they did not build, except. So they didn't destroy these cities. Remember they other destroyed Jericho, Ai, and now Hazor, where they broke the gates and whatever the other cities, but they can rebuild those things. And they've destroyed, first they destroyed the army, then they other destroyed the cities where the armies came from. Now we're going to look at a little background information as we've been doing before we look at our next section, because our next section has some depth that's not necessarily apparent without the background information, and just people will casually read this and not really understand the depth of what they're reading. So we're going to do that today by looking at some background information first. In Exodus 8:28 through 32, we read the following. Pharaoh said, I will let you go, that you may sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness. Only you shall not go very far away, and entreat for me. And Moses said, I will go out before you, and I will entreat the Lord that swarms of flies may depart from Pharaoh, from his servants, from his people, tomorrow. But let not Pharaoh deal deceitfully more, not letting people go to sacrifice to the Lord. And Moses went out into Pharaoh and entreated the Lord. And Moses, according to the word of the Lord, did according to the word of Moses, and he removed the swarms of flies from Pharaoh, from his servants, from his people, and there remained none. And Pharaoh hardened his heart at this time also. Here he let the people go. And these flies may have just been house flies, but they may have been those terrible tsetse flies they have down in Africa that they'll just buzz around and annoy you. They bite you as well. But either way, it's bad. I mean, I used to live in Greece. They'd come in the summer, and it was a problem when I was out running or whatever. Sometimes these things would bite you. Well, anyways, regardless of that, here's the thing we want to know this. We're going to look at this thing about hardening the heart. Notice who hardened Pharaoh's heart. Pharaoh hardened his heart. This time also. He had done it before. Why he hardened his heart? Because he was dealing deceitfully and not letting the people go. And notice, Pharaoh tried to. Pharaoh was not willing to get the surrender to give surrender solely to God. God, Moses said 3 days into the desert, he said, "No, I'll let you go, but not very far away." Trying to bargain with God, and and the truth, and the fact is, or negotiate with God, I perhaps should say. We can make deals with God, and He can, accept them or not. But when He gives you as a commandment, there's no negotiating. We have no negotiating power. He's the one who's negotiating from strength, and we can either accept his terms or suffer the consequences. Well, Pharaoh is like he'll accept his terms and try to make a compromise, but he doesn't even mean that. He didn't even let him go at all. Not even a little ways. Not even a little way. Not very far away. Even after he saw God perform a miracle, two miracles, one bringing the flies and then getting rid of the flies, okay? Even he saw deliverance of God to him and his people. His heart was still hardened. Pharaoh was responsible for his heart being hardened. Now, we're going to look at another case about a hardened heart and what led up to it here in Deuteronomy 2, verse 24 through 27. And let's read and let's look at this heart hardening process again from another angle this time. Again, Deuteronomy 2, verse 24 through 27. Rise up, take your journey, and pass over the river Arnon. Lord, I've given into your hand Sihon, the Amorite, king of Heshbon, in his land. Begin to possess and contend with him in battle. This day I'll put the dread of you and the fear of you upon the nations under the whole heaven, who shall hear report of you and shall tremble and be in anguish because of you. Then I sent messengers out of the wilderness of Akedemoth unto Sihon, king of Heshbon, with words of peace, saying, "Let me pass through your land. I will go by the highway, and you will turn to the right hand nor to the left." Okay, so as we was talking about the acts of Moses before and looked at this, I mean, God says he's going to give him this king and contend with him in battle. But notice Israel's not to start the is not going to start the battle. Moses speaks to him with words of peace because so Sihon is being given the opportunity to do this, and this is not a demand like Pharaoh had. I mean, just let me pass through your land. If we look at the past, he goes on to tell him about how he'd done this before. The other people didn't harm him and paid him for the food and drink and accept, that they had. And he says, "I'm just passing through to go over the cross Jordan." But he knows Sihon's not going to do it. Sihon's going to harden his heart, just as God had known Pharaoh would harden his heart, and had said, "I'll harden his heart by demanding he let my people go." Well, Sihon here is going to harden his own heart, despite very not really any demands at all. Just notice words of peace. Talk to him peaceably. Try diplomacy first. But Moses knew diplomacy was going to fail, and so we see in Deuteronomy 2, verse 30 through 35. But Sihon, king of Heshbon, would not let us pass by him. For the Lord hardened his spirit and made his heart obstinate, he might deliver him to your hand, as appears this day. The Lord said to me, "Behold, I've given Sihon his land before you. Begin to possess, that you may inherit his land." Then Sihon came out against us, and he and all the people fought at Jahaz. And the Lord delivered him before us, and we smote him and his sons and all his people. We took all the cities at that time. The Lord destroyed the men and the women and the little ones of every city. We left none to remain. Only the cattle we took for a prey to ourselves, and the spoil of the cities which we took. Okay, so the Lord hardened his spirit. Well, how did he harden his spirit? By telling Sihon to let him do something. I have Moses tell Sihon something to let him do something that Sihon did not want to let them do. Sihon wanted the authority to say, "No, you're not gonna pass through my land." In fact, Sihon gathered his army to fight against him. You know, he met him out. He met him out. He met. Notice he came out against us. His response to these words of peace was an act of war. Well, God knew this is the way Sihon was. So this is how the heart hardening process works. Someone who has pride already, God tells them to do something that challenges their pride, and they harden their own heart. So you could say God's responsible in the sense that he did something he knew that would cause him to react that way. That's his part. But the fact is, they made their own choice. He just knew what they was going to choose. It's not unlike a mother. People you say, "Well, my mom had eyes in the back of her head." Well, she didn't really. She just knew her children and knew when they're in this situation, this one's going to do that. It's the same. It's the same sort of thing here with God and with people. He knows the hearts of people and how they're going to react when he tells them to do certain things. Now, the next thing we're talking about is the people of Anak. It's relevant to our next section here in Joshua. And here's what we read in Numbers 13, verses 31 through 33. But the men went up with him, said, "We are not able to go up against this people, for they are stronger than we." And they brought every report of the land which they searched of the children of Israel, saying, "The land that we've gone to search, which we have gone to search it, is a land that eats up the inhabitants thereof. And all the people we saw are men of great stature. And we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight." I notice it says the giants that come out of the giants. What it means is Anak was a giant, we saw in Genesis 6, chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, where angels had married human women and had children. Those were giants before and after the flood, both were told. Well, now those giants married human women, and as we've shown before, it's kind of a whittling down process, but they're still larger than other men, and notice much larger. You know, we're grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Well, you know, they're scouts. What they do? Go ask them. You know, but or maybe perhaps they laughed at them. Who knows? So you know, they're just saying we're very small. They're going to easily crush us. But Anak is this giant here. The sons of Anak come out of this giant. Remember, Og of Bashan's the last giant to be killed. So Anak had died before that, but his descendants are still there and they're still big. And we continue on in Deuteronomy 1, verses 28 through 23, and read the 32 and read the following. "Whither shall we go up? Our brethren discouraged our hearts, saying, The people is greater and taller than we. The cities are great and walled to heaven. More have we seen the sons of Anakims there. But I said to you, dread not, neither be afraid of them. The Lord your God goes before you, which he shall fight for you, according to all he did for Egypt before your eyes. In the wilderness, where you have seen how God has bear you as a man does his son, and all the way you went until you came to this place. Yet in this thing you did not believe the Lord your God." Okay, now notice that it's not just the people are big, but the cities, I mean, wall up to heavens, figuratively speaking. You know, the look at the ground, I can see as the wall and sky is the ideal. The walls are, you know, the cities are huge. The walls are huge. And these giants are there, the sons of Anakim, you know, which are literally sons of the giants, but still huge people. And what's Moses' response? Don't fear them. Don't. God will take care of them. But this generation just did not believe it. They had this problem and they did not trust God with it to take care of it. And so they left it for another generation. Now, in Deuteronomy 9, verses 1 through 3, we read the following. Hear, O Israel, you are to go over Jordan this day to go and possess nations greater and mightier than yourself, cities great and fenced up to heaven, a people great and tall, the children of the Anakims who you know, and of whom you have heard said, who can stand before the children of Anak? Therefore, this understand therefore, say the Lord your God goes before you. A consuming fire shall destroy them and shall bring them down before your face. So you shall drive them out and destroy them quickly, as the Lord your God said unto you. Okay, now he's talking to that next generation. They're getting ready to cross over. This is in his big speech that covers like Deuteronomy, most like from pretty much chapter 2 to the end of chapter, I want to say it's chapter 30. Okay, one long speech, most of it. And this is in the midst of that. Now notice what Moses doesn't say. Ah, that was a fairy tale. That was a weak excuse. They just were lazy. No, the problem was real. Okay, the problem, and the same with us. Our problems are real. They are too big for us to handle, and if we don't handle them, we can't handle them by ourselves. But we can do it with God's help. And if we don't, we leave it for our children to deal with. And perhaps we have dealing with problems that our parents didn't take care of, our or the previous generation, may not be our parents directly, but the previous generation did not deal with, and the problem just did not go away on its own. They're not going to go away on their own. There are things in life that are too big for you to handle on your own, and you really have two choices. One is trust God and seek Him and walk in His ways and overcome the problem. The second is never possess good things that God wanted to give you, your promised land, as it were, and leave the problem for your children to deal with, and cause them to not grow up experiencing the good things God would have liked for them to experience growing up. So the problem has not gone away. The giants are still there, but God is still there to provide the solution like He was for the previous generation. Now we're going to go to Genesis. We're going to do Deuteronomy 2, part of Moses' speech, and we're going to look at. And Moses had told them, they have reason to believe they can overcome these giants because other people had done so. And we begin there with Deuteronomy 2, verses 10 through 12. The Amines dwelt there in times past, a people great and many and tall, as the Anakims. And they were accounted giants as the Anakims, but the Moabites called them Amims. And the Horims also dwelt in Seir before, but the children of Israel of Esau succeeded them. They destroyed them before them and dwelt in their stead, as Israel did in the land's possession, which the Lord gave them. Okay, so you got two sets of giants here, the Horims and the Amines, who are both giants like the Anakim. The Moabites conquered their giants. They faced their giants and took them over. And they did not have the Melech Adonai with them particularly, but they had some knowledge of God, and they did this. They had some knowledge of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The God of Abraham, perhaps I should say. Okay. Esau had some knowledge of the God of Abraham and Isaac. And they destroyed the giants that were standing between them and the land that God had given promised that Abraham had given to them. Both of these groups, Abraham had given them land, and they faced their giants and overcame them. Now, in Deuteronomy 2, verse 19 through 21, we read about another group that whom Abraham had given land to, and their giants. And when you come nigh over against the children of Ammon, distress them not in their meddle with them, for I will not give you the land of the children of Ammon any possession, because I have given the children of Lot for possession. That was also a land of giants. Giants dwelt there in old time, and the Ammonites called them Zamzumims, and a people great and tall, and many and tall as the Anakims. But the Lord destroyed them before them, and they succeeded them and dwelt in their stead. Well, notice, remember, Ammon's the children of Lot. So the children of Lot, Abraham, God gave Abraham a much larger chunk, promised a much larger chunk of land than just what he promised Israel. And Abraham gave part of that to Lot, and Lot gave, and Lot's descendants got this. He gave part of, Isaac gave part of it to Esau. And notice that, again, you're not to take their land. Okay, you can't take. That's their land. I'm not giving it to you. That's not part of the land that was promised to Israel, but was promised to Abraham. Well, they had giants as well, and notice the Lord destroyed these giants before them. They moved into the land of their promise, knowing something about the God of Abraham. I mean, the God of Abraham, the God of Lot. But unfortunately they had married and died with idolaters and stuff, and forgot him. Eventually, their descendants did, but they knew something about him. And the Lord, remember, the Bible calls Lot righteous Lord. Perhaps for the sake of their father, destroyed these giants before them so they could take the land. And Israel knows this. Moses is rehearsing this to them. They have reason. Other people have done it. The Lord's helped them. They have reason to believe they can overcome their own giants because God's already done it for other people. Now, in Deuteronomy 2, verses 22 to 23, read the following. As he did for the children of Esau, which dwelt in Seir, he also destroyed the Horims from before them. And they succeeded them and dwelt in their stead even to this day. And the Avims, which dwelt in Hazorim, even unto Azza, the Caphtorims, which came from Caphtor, destroyed them and dwelt in their stead. Okay, you have this other group of giants here, the Avims, okay? The city here is Hazorim. And in the area around it, all the way over to this other city, Azza. Now, Caphtor is where the Caphtorims that came out of Caphtor and moved it are the Philistines. And the Philistines, the word literally means invader. The word Palestinian is just comes from the Latin word for Philistine. It means invader. They were not, when you go look at the list of nations, they're in the promised land. The Philistines, Israel was to wipe out. The Philistines are never listed. They were not part of there. They were invaders. And remember, that problem of all this intermarrying with giants and their descendants being mingled all throughout the bloodline among the Canaanites. Well, these people who don't even know God, but are going into the land that God has promised Israel, God gave them favor to wipe out, gave them the ability to wipe out, perhaps with the ideals, whatever, the giants in their land. Not even land that was promised them, land they were invading. So, the fact is, you make moves, you make excuses. They had all the reason Other people had done this before who didn't have the Melech Adonai, the visible presence of God before him all the time. They had every reason to believe that they could do this, but the previous generation just had not done it. And there's whatever God and notice, so whatever God has promised is able with His help. He never told them to do this on their own. In fact, if, as we said before, if your dream is so small you can do it without God's help, then it's not the dream He has for you. God helped these people whether they knew it or not, or they acknowledged Him or not. And because and these people, this last group is clearing out part of the giants from Israel for the people of Israel. Now, now we're looking at our next section with all that in mind about hardening the heart and the dealing with your giants. And here's what we see. As the Lord commanded Moses' servant, so Moses commanded Joshua, and so did Joshua. He let nothing undone of all that the Lord had commanded Moses. So Joshua took all the land, the hills and all the south country and all the land of Goshen, and the valley and the plain and the mountain of Israel, and the valley of the same. Even that goes from Mount Halak, that goes up to that goes up to Seir, even unto Baal Gad, in the valley of Lebanon under Mount Hermon. All their kings he took and smote them and slew them. All right, the south country, down near that southern border of the land promised to Jacob, that touched the land, the land of Esau, of Edom, whom they were not to take any of. All the way from there, notice all the way north to just south, meaning under below Lebanon, Mount Hermon, the southern part there of that range, way up into what's Lebanon today, the country of Lebanon. That's north and south. In east and west, he took this strip that includes the land of Goshen. So he's taking a pretty good strip of land. A little hard to say that on a map, but maybe between 10 and 20 miles wide. Between 10 and 20 miles wide, if you're metric, that's between 30 and 60 kilometers wide. No, up maybe perhaps 100 miles going north and south. Okay, going east to west, 10, 20 miles north and south, 100 miles. He's taking a pretty good sized chunk of land here. 100 miles, if your metric is about 160 kilometers. Okay, so he's taking this huge, area of perhaps 2,000 square miles in English, in English measurements, which would be about 50,000 square kilometers if you're metric. And he smote all these people who were there. Of course, they all had the option to flee, as we saw before, and perhaps some who didn't come out, and perhaps some just ran away before he ever got there. But all those who came fight, he did this. Now notice this, but this is not a short victory. This big area he's taking here. Notice here, and we'll look at how long in the future lesson, but I'll tell you this: it's years. Okay. And here's what we read in Joshua 11, verses 18 through 20. Joshua made a war a long time with all those kings. There was not a city that made peace with the children of Israel, save the Hivites, the inhabitants of Gibeon. All are they took in battle. For it was of the Lord to harden their hearts that should come against Israel in battle. He might destroy them utterly, and they might find no favor. They might destroy them as the Lord commanded Moses. Okay, so notice a long war. And the Lord hardened their hearts. And we talked about that process. They all had the option of peace, but He knew they weren't going to take it. The Lord hardened their hearts by having Israel there, and, and basically demanded total surrender, like the Gibeonites had done. But no one except Gibeon made peace. No one took the offer of peace, and we'll see what a small percentage they are later. So, if God moves you, gives you a promised land, you can expect opposition, and you're to seek peace if possible. But to bring about your promised land, God may tell you, that peace may provoke them so that God can show up on your behalf to conquer your promised land. Now, in Joshua 11, verse 21 through 23, we're going to wrap up this section with the Anakims that we talked about. Because remember, they are the big they were the big deterrent from taking the promised land, from possessing it and conquering it. At that time, came Joshua and cut off the Anakims from the mountains, from Hebron, from Deber, from Anab, and from the mountains of Judah, and from the mountains of Israel. Joshua destroyed them utterly with their cities. There was none left, the Anakims left in the land of the children of Israel. Only in Gaza, in Gath, and Ashdod there remained. Joshua took the whole land according to all the Lord had spoken to Moses, and Joshua gave for an inheritance into Israel according to the divisions of their tribes in the land of rested from war. Okay, remember this is occurring in a period of years. We'll look and we'll drill down to some details of what happened during those years in a future lesson. But the end result is he wiped out all the Anakims, just the Lord had said, except the ones living over in the area in the land of the Philistines. They remained there. And notice the mountains of Judah are the mountains south of this valley, where, like Jerusalem's down. And there's, if you look at a map, a topographical map, there's another set of mountains north of that, over in Samaria and so on. So that's why it's got these mountains of Judah in the south, mountains of Israel in the north, because it's a reference to the divided kingdom later. Well, they destroyed them with their cities. The Anakims wiped out. When you're facing the giants, and God's with you, no one can stand before you. If God's with you, who is going to stand against you? It does not matter how large they are, how much stronger, what position of strength, maybe better, better technology, whatever the case is. If God's in it, it will work out. And God was in it, and they came to possess. They came to possess all the promised land they were going to possess this time. Now we're about another group. Another group they're going to have to fight besides the giants during this long war here. Now these are the kings the children of Israel smote, possessed their land. Oh, I'm sorry, I got there. We looked at that. Now we're going to look at the summary of all the war of all everything, all the wars to possess the promised land, all that's been conquered up to this point, starting with the eastern promised land. Here's what we read in Joshua 12, verses 1 through 3. Now these are the kings of the land, which the children of Israel smote and possessed their land on the other side of Jordan towards the rising of the sun, from the river Arnon unto the Mount Hermon, in all the plain on the east. Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon and ruled from Aroer, which is on the bank of the river Arnon, and from the middle of the river, and from the half Gilead unto the river under the river Yavak, which is in the border of the children of Ammon, from the plain to the sea of Kinneroth in the east, and to the plain of the sea, even the salt sea on the east. The way to Beth Yeshimoth and from the south under Ashdoth Pisgah. And again, why it says in the middle of the river. Remember, the city was built in the middle of the river. Okay, it was in the river actually divided them and the Moabites, but they had the city in an island in the middle of it. Okay, which made it very defensible, but nonetheless, God was with them and they took it. And Kedaroth, remember, means is the Sea of Galilee. It's the Hebrew word for harp. And if you look at the shape of the Sea of Galilee, you can see it's shaped kind of like a harp. That's why it's called Kinneroth. But this area from all the way down there south of the Dead Sea, the Sea of the Plain, the Salt Sea, that's the Dead Sea. Today, people would call it, if you look at a map, all the way up to the plain of the east side of the Lake Sea of Galilee, and all the way up from there to the area of Mount Hermon. And so he starts with, and the first part they took was this southern part that Sihon had ruled over, as we read about earlier. Because remember, his heart was hardened by Moses offering him peace, because he did not want peace. Now, we continue on in Joshua, as I say, 12 verses 4 through 6. In the coast of Og, king of Bashan, which is the remnants of the giants that dwelt at Ashtaroth and Edrei, and reigned in Mount Hermon, and in Salca, and in Bashan, under the border of the Gershonites and the Machathites, and the half Gilead, the border of Sihon, king of Heshbon. Them did Moses, the servant of the Lord, the children of Israel, smite. Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave it to possession unto the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half tribe of Manasseh. Okay, remember, the half tribe of Manasseh, the Machathites were part of the tribe of Manasseh. They got half Gilead. Why half Gilead? Half of it's on the east side, and the other half is on the west side of the west side of the Jordan. Parts in the eastern promised land, parts in the western promised land, half. So, this northern part, this king, and notice he's a remnant of the giants. He was an actual giant. He's got the largest, for his bedstead size, makes him appear to be maybe 50% to twice as big as Goliath. Okay, he was the largest. He's indicated being the largest person we got an indication of, and they utterly destroyed him to get the eastern promised land. All this before they went across the Jordan River to possess the other part. Now we're gonna start reading about the western promised land. That's all before Joshua. Now they got some confidence built up. They went, and this is what happened here as we read in Joshua 12, verse 7 through 9. When they're possessing their promised land, they're conquering it. And these are the kings of the country which Joshua and the children of Israel smote on this side Jordan on the west, from Baal Gad in the valley of Lebanon, even the Mount Halak that goes up before Seir, which Joshua gave unto the tribes of Israel for possession according to their divisions. And in the mountains, and in the valleys, and in the plains, and in the springs, and the wilderness, and the south country, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, notice the king of Jericho won. The king of Ai, which is beside Bethel, won. Okay, so So now we're looking. We got a summary again of all that Joshua's conquered on the west side, and now he starts with these kings. And the first one's Jericho, the first place. Other destroyed. Ai, or high really in Hebrew, but we'll go with AI, the pronunciation people usually use. All right, and these we looked at when we talked about the judgment on Jericho in the Valley of Trouble. Okay, so those are the first two he went, and again, it was total destruction in the end. Now we're gonna look at the next set at Joshua 12 verses 10 through 16. The king of Jerusalem won. The king of Hebron won. The king of Yarmouth won. The king of Lachish won. The king of Eglon won. The king of Gezer won. The king of Debir won. The king of Gedir won. The king of Hormah won. The king of Arad won. The king of Libnah won. The king of Adullam won. The king of Makkedah won. The king of Bethel won. All right, these what is it? 14 kings are the ones that came when Gibeon came that made an alliance to destroy the people of Gibeon for making peace with God through the people of Israel. There was 5 kings who did this, and they had allies, we were told, that had defensive leagues with those kings that Joshua destroyed, who came out to fight with him. And that was what, and so when we're talking about these were the kings that were destroyed in saving Gibeon. Now we look at the next group in Joshua 12, verses 17 through 20. The king of Tapua won. The king of Hepher won. The king of Aphek won. The king of Lasharon won. The king of Madon won. The king of Hazor won. The king of Shimromiron won. The king of Akshaph won. Okay, so now we see these 8 kings here that we saw at the beginning. They came out and made this huge army with the chariots, and they were defeated very quickly. But that is the end of the quick victories. We get to our last list, and these kings were not all united together. They had to go. They're spread over a large area, and they had to go to them one by one. And again, well, it took years, and we'll look at how many years a little later in another lesson. But just know it was years. Perhaps everyone before these 8 were done perhaps in 3 or 4 months, maybe a year at the most. But the rest of these all took years because of the large area, and because they didn't all conveniently unite at once, so they could all be wiped out at once like the others. So here's what we read: the king of Anak won. The king of Megiddo won. The king of Kadesh won. The king of Yachneam of Carmel won. The king of Dor and the coast of Dor won. The king of nations of Gilgal won. The king of Tirzah won. All the kings 30-1. Okay, so you got 7 kings here, and Joshua took about, we'll look at it later next time. But there's 7 kings, and it took they weren't close. Perhaps a year a king, and I'll show you why I said that next time. Okay, to fight these kings, they're over a large area. Megiddo's down the south. Carmel's over the north, but it's not far from the Mediterranean Sea. Notice king of the nations of Gilgal. So notice there's no city here. Gilgal is where Israel's camped at. And and if there's a city there, it's not. It's just an administrative thing. Then the case that these groups were nomadic, kind of like we saw before with the Amalekites. Okay, a little tougher to deal with. They don't have not necessarily a city to go attack and take over, and you know, going to take a lot more effort. But all these had to be dealt with to take possession of the promised land. So these 31 plus Gibeon make 32. So one out of 32 was saved, which works out to be 3.18% or 3.125% if you prefer to use the decimal. Now, what's interesting about that is it lines up with many other places in the Bible about a few being saved. Messiah said a few will be saved. But then you see in Scripture, back in days of Jesus' disciple, when they read in the Scripture that in Greek, myriads of myriads, 10,000s times 10,000s, so it's 400 million minimum, would stand. Saints were going to stand before him. In the world's population, the entire globe's population is less than perhaps a quarter billion, 250 million at the time. Didn't seem to quite add up. But today, people who say population tell us more people are alive on Earth today than all the other generations combined, bringing the total population of people who lived on the Earth to about 13 million. Well, 3% of that is about 400 million. So 400 million, roughly a little bit larger than the population of the United States, is small and is in proportion the same as Gibeon compared to the 31 that were not saved. All of them, as we showed last week, knew of the miracles of God. They knew of what God wanted. But only one was willing to come to him in total surrender, and that's the only one that was saved. And we're going to close by looking at, remember, God said that he would show them no favor, all right, and show them no favor. Well, why is he not going to show them any favor? He might destroy them because they're not willing to do what it takes to gain his favor. And he knew this. And this is, they had opportunity. Remember also the option was to leave the promised land. They had that opportunity, and we saw some people had done that. They had three options. Israelites are coming, leave, let them have it. 2, do like the Gibeonites, come to him in total surrender. 3, resist him. Resist God and his will. And that's what these 31 had chose. So that's why they got no favor. Because here in Job 33, verses 26-28, we read how to get favor from God. He shall pray unto God, and he'll be favorable to him. He shall see his face joy, for he'll render unto man his righteousness. He looks upon men. If they say, I've sinned and pervert the way which is right, it profit me not. He will deliver his soul from going to the pit, and his life shall see the light. The pit is a reference to hell, okay? The lowest Sheol that Moses said that was set on fire by the wrath of God. How a man is righteous, and how does he get righteous? But when he sinned, admitting it. I've sinned and perverted that which is right. Turning from his sin. And that agreeing with God he had done wrong. And turning from his sin to do what's right in God's eyes. That's what gives you favor with God. Now in Jeremiah 16, verses 12 through 13, we read the following. You have done worse than your fathers. For behold, you walked every one of you after the imagination of the evil heart, they may not hearken to me. Therefore I will cast out this land, a land you know not, neither your fathers, nor near you, nor your fathers, and there you shall serve other gods day and night, where I will show you no favor. Okay. He's talking to the people of Israel here. The chosen people are always going, we're chosen, never asking chosen to do what? Chosen to show the world, the Gentiles, how to walk in God's ways. Well, they don't just get a pass because they're the chosen people. They have to do what's right in his eyes as well. And when they don't, he's not going to show them any favor. They're not. When they refuse to listen to him and walk in the imagination of their own evil heart, he doesn't treat them any different than he does the Gentiles who do the same thing. There is no ideal of predestination, and people just do these things because they're predestined to do them. God lets them be self-sorting, as we're seeing here. They choose where to walk in the imagination of their own heart. They choose where not to continue in evil or turn from it. They choose where not to, if they turn, when they turn from it and walk in righteousness and gain his favor, or be stubborn and refuse to return from their wickedness and not get any favor at all from him. Now, we want to continue, we're going to finish here in James 4:4-8. You adulterers and adulteresses, know you not that friendship is the world is enmity with God? Whosoever will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God. Do you think that Scripture says in vain, the Spirit dwells in us lust to envy? But he gives more grace. Wherefore, he says, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he'll flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Okay. He calls them double-minded. Why? Because they're trying to be friends with God and friends of the world both. You cannot do it. The carnal mind, the carnal mind, the be carnally minded is death, we're told in Romans 8, I believe it's 7. But to be spiritually minded is life and peace. The carnal mind is not subject to God's law, neither indeed can be. The world has a carnal mind. It is not subject to God's law, nor can it be. And it will not be your friend if you're keeping the law of God. If you turn to God like the people like Gibeon did, they will turn against you. You are in a war whether you want to be or not. There is no middle ground. Just like in the promised land, just as how we saw Israel, once they crossed the Jordan and it was flooded, there was no turning back. It was victory or death for them. And it's victory or death for you as well. You cannot be friends with everybody. There is God on one side and those who hate God on the other. And you must choose. That's what it says. The Spirit dwells in us, lust to envy. Means he's jealous. He's not going to share us. Just like I wouldn't go around sharing my wife with other men. Or many other things like that. We're not going to share. God is not willing to share you with the world. You have to pick a side. And you will get the grace of God if you humble yourselves. God resists the proud. Those kings were proud. All of them we looked at, Sihon. All Moses did was ask nicely to go through his land, and the guy showed up with ask him peaceably. Didn't even ask him for for anything. So they had paper, whatever they used, and he showed up with an army. He was proud, but God resisted him. But Gibeon was humble, and God gave them grace, and it's the same with us. We are humble when we submit ourselves to God. That's how we resist the devil and he will flee. And remember, those giants were telling those the fallen angels associated with the devil, but they were no match for our God. And Satan knows it. Those who are staying between you and your promised land, who want to keep you out of it, you have to resist him by doing what God says, by submitting to God, refusing to go along with evil to get along with evildoers, not pretending to be not trying to be friends with the enemies of God. And we do that, they will flee from you. You will win the fight. You will be given area God has in mind for you. But he leaves it up to you. He treats you the way you treat him. If you draw near to him, he will draw near to you. And if you have been wishy-washy, right, trying to be on the fence, one foot in the world, one foot in the church, so to speak, one foot in the things of God, one foot in the things of the world, you're never going to possess your promised land. You have to clean your heart, your hands, and purify your hearts. And you do that by coming to God in total surrender, admitting, as we saw in Job, that you have sinned. If you'll confess your sins, he's just to forgive them. And I urge you to do it so you can possess your promised land. That's all I have for this week. Until next week, shalom.